Welcome to Core Concepts. Of course, if you've been going to the Renford Broadcast Network on YouTube, you know that we have many people who come and talk about what they believe, why they believe it, what they're doing about it. In other words, how did they come to that belief system, and how's it manifesting in their lives? And today, we have a very interesting guest. I heard him talk a week ago and asked him to come be on the show. And he has a book that we're going to feature on Bookman's show when he comes back from Florida. But today we're going to simply be talking about, or letting him talk. I don't know what he's going to talk about. It's whatever he wants to say. This show is coming to you today from the Grindz Coffee Shop on Dexter Road in Memphis, Tennessee. And we have moved around quite a bit. Some shows are on site in the facilities of the guests that we're interviewing. But we'll be doing all of the shows for October here at Grindz as guest of Ahmed Sharif, the owner of the establishment. He opens this facility just for us for the Core Concepts lectures on Sunday. My guest is Joshua. And if you got the notice, it said Joshua 888, because when I met him recently at a meeting, he had 888 written on his name tag. So maybe you can tell us what the 888 is all about as we start. Welcome to the show. Tell us what you want to tell us.
Jim, I want to tell you first, thank you.
What?
Because it would be too long for me to explain in one show in an hour the amount of little meaningful events. To some people, miracles. To some people, synchronicities, or what people would call in some cultures divine order. In Hebrew, people, when you say Shalom Aleichem, how are you? People say Akol Beseder, everything in order. So I have to say thank you for being in that order and for receiving me as a friend in your program and in your home and in your heart, and introduce me to your daughter and to your friends. Very glad to be here.
Very glad to have you.
Now, the 888 question, it's a very long one. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer that in this hour. But okay, let's say that along the way we'll talk a little bit about the 888. Okay?
All right.
And it's a very meaningful number, and I don't mean it necessarily in the Chinese culture, which is also a meaningful number, as you probably know. But the 888, for me, it's connected with an order that it combines all the decimal system apart from the 9. Okay, so it goes from the 0 to the 8. Okay, when you put the 0 and the 8 together, they add up to 8. When you put 1 and 7, it adds up to 8. You put 2 and 6, adds up to 8. And you put 3 and 5, and it adds up to 8. And then you have the 4 in the middle, that's the 4 in the middle, but 4 with 4 adds up to 8. And in Hebrew mysticism, the 9 candelabra, it's called the Hanukkah. It's in Hanukkah. You light up a candelabra with 9 lights. The menorah is a 7 light candle. Yeah? Now, that's supposed to mean, you know, all the connections of the 7 mansion worlds that are so discussed in the Bible, together with all the areas of the body which can somehow, in the consciousness of a human being, attune to those places in the universe. And of course, we can, for some people, say this is true experience, religious experience, spiritual experience. For some people, it's imagination. And but nevertheless, mathematically, numbers shown me a lot, and that's why I took the journey to ponder and contemplate after a long experience as a consultant in the oil industry and the banking system, and being teacher in operations research and simulation. Well, how in the world are we going to model consciousness? How in the world are we going to model the way values kick in our lives and we are able to love one another? I mean, this is something very difficult and nothing new, by the way, because many cultures and many people have tried to talk about these things and make poetry about it. So far, poetry is good. Every nation and culture has its own poetry about the Creator and what is love and unity and truth and spirituality. But what about the science of peace? You know, know, that's been missing for a long time. And if we look at the world today, we're witnessing to so many conflicts, though we're also witnessing the emergence of people who want peace and who want to cross the boundaries of nationalities, of religious belief, and meet in a human-to-human basis for who you are and who I am and who the other person is. And that goes beyond gender, beyond religious belief, beyond nationality, beyond culture, race, genetic bloodlines. There are people who just want to love one another, to be friends. And this is a sample of this. You know, we all came here from different cultures and different nationalities, and we have that commonality. And so the question was, well, okay, so if this is so, and we ought to see the process of the human species becoming survivally driven, you know, with a limbic system, with a mechanism for fight and flight. You know, when you see a threat, you want to protect yourself, your children, you know, etc. Yeah. Well, how it transforms, it mutates, it evolves, or by God's grace, it changes. Yeah. Into a peaceful human being which is capable of loving its enemies and being altruistic and showing kindness to any creature. I mean, there is a transformation in the brain that has to happen to shift perception of reality. So if this is so, if there are people who can actually shift, and that's connected with cultural activities or with environment or with values, the values that the person lives by or experiences, then science is called to investigate how in the world a person can become survivally driven into peaceful. And if this is so, and it can be learned, and people can actually pass it on to their children, and between friends, we can grow into being more peaceful and more relaxed and more altruistic, then perhaps we have a chance to witness eventually as a species the long-awaited prophecies of peace, you know, a word of peace. And so, okay, so in that journey, I'd have to go back in time to tell you how I ended up in this, but a journey of bringing to our attention as scientists the subject of peace and do something about it. And that's why numbers started to become very important. So I started to look at order, of course. In different matters, you can look at order. You can look at order in nature. You can look at order in music, harmony. You can look at order in mathematics. And mathematics is perhaps one of the most important symbolic language we have to explore order. Because first of all, it's not necessarily verbal. Second, you're contemplating objects which do not necessarily stimulate your ears or your skin. They stimulate your mind. So if you can stimulate your mind in a matter that is showing you order and is showing you something greater, then you start to see that first that you're not just the only thing that is in the universe, or you know the most important thing. You're part of an order. And your thought patterns are thrown away from destructive patterns because you have to focus on a process of numbers. So you're thinking about that. You're not thinking about how much I really dislike this person, or how much I dislike this kind of people, or you're thinking about order. You know, your thought process is away from destructive thoughts. So perhaps mathematicians unknowingly or knowingly are meditators in a way, okay? They're meditating on order and trying to find meaning in that order. And that was the quest of science, to find meaning and explanation to the universe so that we could improve our lives and understand better who we are. Well, that's not divorced from the wisdom of the past. Prophets, saints, bodhisattvas, normal parents that lived in the jungle, let's say in the Amazon, they wanted to find some sort of explanation about how to live harmoniously with them and with the, you know, nearby tribes. So all that academic talk that I'm telling you was not what drove me to this world. It was an experience. It was an experience which started in around 1993. Well, it started in my childhood, but let's say it catalyzed, it reached the peak in 1993, when after having a blessed family in Venezuela, very spiritual grandmother and father, with the possibility for me to travel by myself as a surfer since I was a child and be in touch with nature. As a surfer, you get in the water, and it's you with the elements. So you really have to be yourself there, You cannot really play games with the ocean because it will show you your limitations very quickly. So you learn to have a relationship with the ocean of respect, of something which is way more powerful than you as a physical being, not to say spiritually speaking, but physically. You learn your boundaries. You learn, okay, the ocean provides me the wave I can ride, and if it's big and I have a sort of mastery, maybe I can have a good time, but if I don't have that mastery, then I will have a bad time in the ocean, because the ocean has reefs, has a lot of things, that you have to be aware of. And, well, growing in the ocean since the age of 7, surfing, and, eventually, because a friend told me I should go into competitions, he put me in the competition. I ended up winning my first national in Venezuela when I was 11. That became the central pillar of my life. Every weekend, the ocean. And in that, I saw a lot of little miracles, which as a child I never called miracles. Because when you're a child, you're not telling the difference between a miracle and a normal situation. Everything is your experience in a very childlike way. But I can tell you this. For example, one day, one of my best friends, who was elder than me, I was just about 14, he passed away. He committed suicide. I was shocking for the community of surfers. He happened to be the best surfer of Venezuela at that time. Nobody was expecting such a thing. And it was very hard for people to swallow the news, yeah? But what I noticed amongst my friends is that they were very scared to go to the funeral because they were 14, 13, 15, and he was being, not buried, but when you have the funeral service where like an hour away from the Marina Club, we used to surf. So kids were not allowed to go necessarily by their parents, by bus, not in my case. But I'm seeing all these kids wanting to go to the funeral and they're not able to act. And I couldn't understand, so I said, why don't we go? Oh no, my parents told me I shouldn't go. And, Venezuela is a dangerous country to be on a bus, not so much on those days, but still. But for me, I was traveling around South America by myself with the blessings of my grandparents when I was 13. And experiencing what today we would call, divine order or synchronicity or a connection with God, which is beyond the comprehension of many people in the modern society. And so I left to the funeral, and I spent 2 days around that situation, looking at their family crying. And for me, I remember it wasn't so much the sadness, but to look at the situation and be part of that as a witness. What's going on here? I've never been to something like this. It's a little bit foreign to me. Yeah? But here I was. Okay. When I wanted to return to the Marina Club, it was too late. 2 days later, nobody could take me there. Everybody was busy with burying him. And so I said, well, when you finish, it's okay, you can take me. So in the back of a truck, which is a big, big truck, at nighttime, I was putting a little bed, like a little mat and sleep. I'm a young child sleeping there, a young, it's rare, under the stars, from here to there, for the funeral, for the houses of friends. I just wanted rest. At 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, just nighttime, the people, I think one of because I don't remember well, but somebody in the truck, I was sort of asleep, needed to buy aspirins for a headache. And so they stop at a pharmacy. And then they approached by this car. And this car, a woman comes out of the car and says, excuse me, do you know Josh? And these two people are astonished. Yeah, which Joshua you mean? A child, he's like about 13, 14, blonde hair, he's a surfer, he came for a funeral of a friend. Oh, yes, he's just lying down on the back of the truck. That was my grandfather and grandmother. They're driving after 2 days, I disappeared. They driving around, searching for me, not making a big fuss about it because my grandmother knows about miracles. I mean, they have to leave Egypt when they were pretty, well established there because when King Farouk was kicked out of power, Nasser came in power, Jewish people had to leave. And though my grandmother, as the story goes in my family, was a good friend of King Farouk because she was peaceful presence and he wanted to have peaceful people around him, she was told, we may look after you, don't worry. But she said, no, I need to go. And they didn't choose to go to Israel. For whatever reasons, too long to say today, they choose to go to Venezuela. So for her, she had to leave her 4 kids in Egypt, not knowing when she would see them again, like leaving Moses in a basket, in the river. And it was 6 years later that they reunited. And I still have, last week, the round of emails when my grandmother just passed away 10 days ago. I was here in Memphis, to read the stories. One of them I'm telling you now, of me being picked up by my grandparents who were so wise and never panicked and knew that everything would be all right. So I knew that kind of thing since I was a child. What I didn't know as a child was that people were not aware of that. That I didn't know because as a child, I'm not questioning that person is suffering in poverty and that person is rich. I'm just a child, 7 years old, 8 years old. I play with the poor, I play with the rich to be their children. Okay? But at the age of 28 was different. I was teaching, consulting, doing mathematical analysis for the whole economic situation of Venezuela, and we're writing a letter to the president of the central bank those days, explaining her why the economy will collapse. Myself and my 3 partners on those days in business. Okay. So I went to my home and I closed my eyes in bed in a little apartment I had in Caracas, and I said to God, why am I so blessed? Since I'm a child, every single dream that I had true. You've shown me so much goodness, friends, family, and there is so much pain and chaos in this city. I wasn't even concerned with a greater world at the moment. I definitely was concerned with the world, but not as much as I was concerned with the people in my own neighborhood. There's so many kids. What's this all about? What's going on? My grandmother and my mother talk about the days no long ago when you could sleep with your doors open in Caracas. Like we do in New Zealand, which is where I live now. So how did that change? Why did we shifted from a peaceful, harmonious environment to a chaotic environment? And how did that happen? I was a child. I couldn't notice how did that happen. If you look at your face every day in the mirror, you will never notice that your hair is growing. You have to look at a picture here and a picture maybe 3 years later say, wow, my hair has grown a lot. But in the meanwhile, you're not noticing the small changes. And those were the small changes that were happening, that can happen towards peace, because we knew peace, and not only in Venezuela, but in many nations. And also these small changes, which are invisible daily, on a daily life, can also shift the whole society towards war. And so why are we paying attention? What's my place in this story? Why am I able to see this? And I talk to some friends and they don't even know what I'm talking about. Most people say to me, Joshua, forget about that stuff. Just do your business. You've got a place to live. It's not your place to fix the world. And I said, well, I cannot sit down and say it's not my place to fix the world. I know it's not my place to fix the world because that's God's, everybody has to come into terms with the Creator and fix themselves. But it's not for me to sit down in complete apathy to wait till everybody fix themselves. If I can play a song or say something nice to somebody, I've seen so many times my grandmother cooking a meal for a person who doesn't have something to eat, or somebody is troubled, you say to them, it's okay, come, I'll help you. That brings them more calm, and, we're called to do something about it. Otherwise, we may as well, sit down in the mountains and wait till life is gone. And so I said to God, well, why am I so blessed and there is so much pain? And I had my answers. And those answers, they are too long to tell you in an hour, but I'm telling you one story, and then I'll move to why the brain of Melchizedek? Okay? And what constitutes the brain of a person who, in Hebrew terminology, in the Bible, in original Bible terminology, it's called a tzaddik. A righteous person is not a person who's right and makes everybody else wrong. That's not a righteous person. That's a very confused person. And usually we call that person, how could you fall from so high? You've just taken the throne. You think you're the judge. That's not righteousness. That's self-righteousness, or whatever you want to call it. But in tzaddik, it's a very particular word in Hebrew. It means a person who is so tuned to the spirit of the Creator, to the universal order, to life, and it's in living in grace, in a peace that surpasses all understanding, as it's written in the scriptures of the Torah, which are today the Western scriptures for most people, the Bible, in South America, in the United States, in Europe. But those are scriptures which go back in time to Israel. Where did they come from? Why these people spoke about this universal order? And what constitutes a brain that can live in a peace that surpasses all understanding? That's a big question. If Jesus was alive when he was alive as a prophet, as the Son of the living God, and he had the Word of God in his mouth, and his name being in Hebrew Yeshua, which means salvation, and when your name, on those days people made it, you were carrying a name, you should embody your name to your community. If you're called strength, then you should be strong. You should not strong like this, but strong in times of strife. If you're called salvation, then that's how you honor your name, by being in God's will so that God can deliver salvation through you. If you are called Uriel, well, then you're embodying mainly the quality of the light of God, or Uriel, and so then you bring the light into the world when there's confusion and so on. So if I say to you, what's your name? And you tell me, my name is Yeshua. Well, thank you for coming. We have a troubling town. It's about time you show up. You're carrying the name of salvation. Do something about it. If you say to me, well, my name is I Am the Music, well, there is a guitar there, we're ready to sing. I mean, it's been about time that somebody shows up. We've got too many sad things happening. We need some songs here. You do something about it. You embody that. Yeah? So tzaddik, it's a word like that. Tzaddik means a person who's so attuned that he can tell what's the right action to do for the person, not for him. See, it's very easy for me to tell what's right for me, but to tell what's right for another person, and it needs me to be so in tune with God that God can inform my whole consciousness and being, so that when I act without even thinking about it, I can deliver something that comes out of my mouth and my hands that actually you say, wow, thank you so much. I needed to hear that. I've been praying for that for 6 days. Then that's a righteous person, a person who is able to tune so well into what the needs of people are, because the spirit of life and love and truth reveals to that person what the need is and voice it, so that the other person recognizes in that person the same spirit that is alive in that person. And that in poetry, in ancient times, when translated, it sounds something like, I am in you, you are in me, and we are in him or her. If you conceive God as a female presence or a male presence, doesn't matter really, but we live in that spirit. Okay? And when we recognize the spirit in each other, then that's family. That's the difference between a herd and a family. Cows genetically belong to a line. Wines too. But they're not family to each other. They share cognitively, consciously, a character and identity and a relationship, impersonal relationship, which you can call love. He loves me. She loves me. My grandma loves me. So that kind of cognitive process and that recognition requires for us to speak about two things. First, decision making. I love her. I don't love her. I want to love her. I don't want to know anything about him. It's a decision, yeah? Decision making happens in the brain. Values. What I want to embody? Love, peace, harmony, unity? Or do I want to embody survival, power, greed? It's a choice. So we're talking about values. So when we talk about values and decision making, we're definitely talking about the brain. And in modern neuroscience, we talk about the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So the question goes and runs through, well, how does the brain of Jesus look like? Or Yeshua, or Buddha, or any mother or prophetess of Israel, Deborah, or Queen Esther, when she's complete peace? How does her brain operates, her hormonal system? Is it different? Well, if we hear the metaphor, a peace that surpasses all understanding, and we put that in the context of neuroscience, we get a very difficult situation because we get the fight and flight center of the limbic system competing for the motor system, movement, with the prefrontal cortex where supposedly, values and decision making mainly happens. And so now we have to start to understand who takes over the motor system. Yeah? Do I take a bat and defend myself? Or do I put the bat aside and say, wait a moment, why don't we talk and let's be friends? That's a very difficult thing to do. But if it can happen, in one place that this certainly will happen, apart from the soul and the character and the, it's in the brain. The brain will inform the hands, put your hand away from that bat or grab the bat and hit. Yeah? So peace, it's not something that we agree on. Peace is not something that we sign on a contract or a peace agreement. That's why I asked God why there is so much chaos and I'm so blessed. There were so many peace agreements in the city between groups, between economic groups, families, but there was no peace. So peace agreements is not necessarily a guarantee of the presence of peace. Peace agreements, in the best case scenario today, I see them as anger management treaties. I hate you, you hate me, and that we're in this situation, this is the line, we don't bother each other, and if you cross the border, we shoot, if we cross the border, you shoot, and that's it, we have peace. That's not peace. That's very far from peace. That makes a lot of people nervous when they get close to the border because their car is, running out of petrol. We don't have friends near here. So, okay, so peace agreements are not peace. So what constitutes peace? Where are the people who we can say, or they can claim they walk in peace? Who are these people? And I think it's very important for neuroscience to make the distinction between schizophrenic brains out of balance, chemical imbalance, and prophets warning a whole nation about the disaster which is coming. Because, by the way, if we have a scientific community who is labeling people on the basis of coherent words, well, a person can very coherently say, I'm talking to angels, and your Mother Mary just showed up yesterday and left me a rose, which I carry in my heart. Well, there are some people in this world which will label that people mild schizophrenic. Yeah? But I don't believe this is so. I mean, if this is so, the whole of South America and great part of North America is schizophrenic because most people love Mother Mary and they talk to her every night. And there are so many, she's appeared so many places. Now, I don't know how to explain those things, and it's not my intention to do so. But I'm really willing to do good neuroscience to explain that we shouldn't put in mental hospitals or inject people that are saying that they talk to Mother Mary. They're insane because they're not. Okay? They just have a belief. And that belief brings comfort to their souls in many situations. Now, okay, so we look at that and we say, how in the world are we going to explain the difference between the brain of a prophet and the brain of a person who really is chemically imbalanced and is hearing voices because its memory systems are playing out of an imbalance? It's a very big difference. But the prophet, we perhaps would like to hear it to save a nation. The schizophrenic, we wouldn't like to hear the same korero in Maori. Korero means story or word or dialogue, or in the same words, leading a nation to war in the name of God and the angels. It's not like that. How can that possibly be? Okay. So how do we tell the difference? It's a very difficult question for science. Extremely difficult challenge. But if we really ought to do a science which improves the world, then we should take the challenge and start to look carefully about what constitutes peace and how can we really live in peace. And when is a person really coherent? Not because of the words he talks, yeah? Because a person, as I said, could be very troubled and out of balance, schizophrenically speaking, talk about angels, but a prophet may talk about angels and he means it or she means it. It's a real dimension of life. And for the people who's never been in touch with this dimension, well, that perhaps is schizophrenia, but it's not so. And apart from that talk, there is a lot of coherence in the life of a person like that. You know, he loves people, he can build a house with his hands, he can go from place to place and help, he can, you know, he's not about himself, self-centered, upset, trying to change things by force. You know, there are traces in the nervous system and the hormonal system that we can see. Maybe there is no so many stress hormones. You know, it's people that many people can account that he's been a peaceful or she's been a peaceful presence in their life, a peaceful experience to have around. I mean, there are many, many things that we can do to assess the differences between these two modalities, which are very subtle. And one thing we haven't found today still are mirror correlates of consciousness. This is a subject extremely heated in the scientific community. One thing we know for sure is that consciousness is not an easy thing to pinpoint. And I think it's good that it's like that. It gives us a lot of flexibility and freedom to stop and think that we shouldn't just judge and act so quickly. So it makes us think much deeper. So the science of consciousness makes us better humans because it's facing us with something about ourselves that we need to really dig deep to find out. And perhaps it's about time, I thought in those days, that we people who are engineers and scientists and management scientists and business people and, you know, the common mothers and fathers get our head around. That if we don't start to really voice what our values, and particularly the result of that being peace, and start to understand science as a process of exploration of the universe, not a process by which we just explain the survival side of us, yeah, but we express something greater than that, yeah, then science would be of a lot of help for a lot of people who cannot explain to themselves why they're here and why they're troubled, to seek within their own garden of consciousness a connection with something greater or someone greater, for those ones who believe in a personal deity, yeah, to find the right answers and the values that could lead them to become better people. And so that's why the brain of Melchizedek came into being. But I haven't got to how it came into being. I'm just telling you two stories which are disconnected in time by maybe 10 years. You know, what I was asking in Venezuela, how and why there is so much pain in the world, and I'm so blessed. I can't just buy into the story that I'm this blessed guy who was born to Jewish family, perhaps are the chosen people. You know, I can't. My father was born in the United States. He was American, you know, from a family which was Protestant. My mother, born in Egypt of Jewish origin, with also Greek, some form of Greek ancestral line, and European, Portuguese and Italian a little bit, but mainly Matatiahu, Gwen Levy, grandmother. So, you know, they came together, one ex-Protestant, or let's say, you know, not that he walked away from God, but from the institutionalized religious belief. And my mother, who her Jewishness was very personal, not a social thing or a religious practice. You know, she was a practical human being, very good person. Came together. You know, this is not about me taking on board a belief or a deity. It's about my relationship with life, every aspect of life, and the Creator. And that's a personal choice. And that got nothing to do with your belief. It's a personal choice. God will answer any person. And okay, so
Joshua, you talking a lot about peace, and peace is in fact the results of something else. Peace is a result of love. You take your grandmother, you talk about the love that she had, then there was peace. So what do you do to create the love? Because if you create the love, you have the peace.
okay, that's an interesting statement. If you create the love, you have the peace. And in that sense, I can speak what happens in my own life, my own experience in relationship to that statement. I mean, I walked away from Venezuela from a loving family. Okay, so that love was created already. I walk in faith all over the world when I was consulting banks in oil industry. So I didn't walk away on a spiritual quest out of a crisis. I was more like, I want to do the best I can do in my life, and if there's something better than I'm doing, I want to find out, and something better I cannot find in the books. I mean, in science or in mathematics, I have to appeal, when we talk about peace, the peace of humanity, I have to appeal to something way greater than any one of us, because if anybody in this world knew how to bring the world in peace, not in pieces, in peace, we would already be living in peace. But no human being has been able to do that. Not Moses, not Jesus when he was here, no Buddha, no nobody. So we have to appeal to something greater. The source of peace that those people talk about and that they found in their own experience in life. Now, from the brain point of view, it may appear to me that I'm creating the love. So I have to create as a statement. I'm creating the love in order to have peace. But in my continuous witnessing to life and consciousness, I haven't created nothing. I don't even have to create an apple for me to feed myself. They grow in trees. I can use apples and make a fruit salad. I can use earth and silicone and make a camera. Maybe, if I'm instructed on how to do it after 100 years of practicing with many, many people together, but I don't know how to create peace. I mean, apples, much less peace, or love. But I know how to tap into that. Now, perhaps what, we're talking in semantics now, but if we can be in resonance or attuned or connected or in the presence or in the state of love, being love, and we can embody that and express that to others, perhaps that can affect another person. And then in our relationship, we have what we call peace. Yeah? For example, my grandmother used to say to me when I was a child, "Oh, you feel the love that we share?" And I said, "Yeah." It was almost like I can touch it. I said, beautiful. Right. There's nothing in between with my eyes, but I can feel something, around. Maybe it's my perception, but it's real, to me. At that moment, and I said, "Yeah, I can feel the love." He says, "Well, you go and love everybody the same way you love me." Okay, you get to school, and I can guarantee you won't meet all the kids, treating you like your grandmother does. So you meet that guy, who's about to kick you or something, and for me, at that moment, it was silence. I'm in silence, and when this yucky, kind of memory comes at that moment, this young little boy who was, let's say, a little bit troubled himself, he starts screaming, and the only thing I can remember is my grandmother telling me, "Do you feel the love that we share? Then go and love everybody you love me." Well, that wasn't Jesus, that wasn't God, that wasn't Melchizedek, that wasn't the angel Michael, that wasn't Krishna, Buddha, that wasn't nobody. That's a child hearing the voice of his grandmother, the memories of his grandmother saying, "Go and love him as I love you, love me." And I don't know how to do that. Where's the manual? What does that mean? I just know how good it feels to be with my grandmother, but as that memory is there with me, I feel the presence that I share with her. It's completely with me. I can feel it. And I'm quietly holding on to the presence. in the memory of that moment, which is maybe 3 days ago. And suddenly this kid, for no reason, shifts his behavior and becomes a really good friend of mine for the rest of my life, and he keeps on bothering other students or kids, which sometimes I say, oh, just leave it alone. Oh, okay. Okay, so, he starts changing, but he starts treating me really good. Now, I don't know why that happened. I've never done the science. I've never read, diligently wisdom text at the age of 13. I'm just a child. But I'm a witness to the point that I remember this so vividly. Yeah? But I know, I can tell you this, just recently in Greece, I met a lady who had heart disease. She was cooking a little cracker with sesame seeds. Those crackers in Greece are called kourolakia. And we have a great Greek person in the audience, so she probably can confirm that, okay? So those Greek, so I'm looking at, and I look at that cracker and I say, who taught you how to cook that? The lady says to me, what do you mean, what kind of questions is this with a Greek accent? And I said, well, I need to know who taught you how to cook these crackers. So she says, well, my mother taught me, her mother taught her, the mother of her mother taught her mother, and so on until the first mother, which might be God. Why do you ask me this question? And I said, well, I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, and there were around 6 million or 5 million and a half people when I grew up there. And I know a lot of people from the Jewish school and the Christian soccer team that I played with, and the surfing community, and I've never seen those crackers back in the backpack, lunch pack of my sister and my lunch pack. My grandmother used to cook the same crackers. Oh, so what's your name? She means my family. Well, the grandmother's family name, I said Matatia. Oh, well, this is the place of the Matatia. They came running away from Roman prosecution. You have family all over Greek here. And I said, oh, good. So I finally, started to meet the people. When I came back to Venezuela later on in life, I said to my grandmother, I met my family in Greece. You went to Greece, you didn't tell me, all your aunties are there, So my family, I found them because of the crackers of my grandmother. That tradition never allowed me to go astray. I found her on the streets. That woman, I told her, look, I walk in God's will. Well, for me, I'm Orthodox Greek. If you walk in God's will, you should know this book. It's the Bible. So she opened the Bible like this, and she read something in the Bible. I need to read you this. A psalm of King David. King David must have a great uncle, I'll say to my grandmother. It's the same family name, Matatiyahu Levi Cohen. You can go to the New Testament and trace the genealogies. Of Yeshua. And those names are there. So they're here too, those names, those genes. I said, oh, wow, so what do you want me to read? And part of that psalm of Tehillim in Hebrew said, hearken to my voice, or hearken to my presence, and I will turn your enemies into your friends. This is what happened to me when I was a child, and I never read those words. So King David wrote them, but I never read them. It happened to me. I hearkened to the presence of love, which was, by the way, spelled by my grandmother, not by Jesus. Yeah? It might be the same spirit that lived in him, for sure it is, but not by him. And she said, love them as I love you. Those were the words of him, of that prophet, Yeshua. The last commandment I give you is to love each other or one another as I have loved you. But she was Jewish. She never read the life of Jesus. So how these words were in her mouth? Why I heard it from them? Why I experienced that which was in the Psalms that I never read? And how I found my family as promised by God. Without him, I will reunite you, to the astonishment of the whole world by a cracker, in Greece. And to read, for this person to show me what I experienced since I was a child happens when you are holding into the presence of love. Now, many people know that in completely different context than what I'm speaking. So many people say, well, Joshua, in my paradigm, or in my way of thinking, if you are a presence of love, you will attract love to your life. Yeah? Some other people say, well, if you put a good karma out there, you'll get a good karma for yourself. And so on and so on. I really don't mind how this is articulated. We're talking about the same thing. Okay, so how do we explain that neuroscientifically? What are the differences between behavioral values? Yeah, I cook samosa, you cook falafel. She cooks arepas, a dish, Venezuelan dish, tradition. That guy cooks, burgers. And this is behavioral values and spiritual values. They are different kind of values. Behavioral values are good boy, bad boy kind of values. Yeah? What's good in a culture might not be good in another culture. Okay? What's bad in a culture might not be bad in another culture. Behavioral values. Okay? But love, as a universal, is the same in every culture. Mothers love their children equally in any culture. Truth, it's the same in any culture. And a mathematical equation is the same in any culture. So we have things which are universals. Pain is exactly the same in every culture. And blood is exactly the same in every culture. And DNA, not the particular configurations, but what constitutes DNA, is exactly the same in every culture. So we have some universals to deal with. We can apply ourselves to understand scientifically what constitutes peace in terms of universals. And if we, in that equation we bring quantum physics, then now we speak about a paradigm which is systemic. It's not reductionist, it's not just analytical, it doesn't take a whole and divides it in parts. If you take a car and you pull it apart to hopefully understand better a car, you will never understand the movement of that car, because a car whose parts are pulled apart cannot move. If you take a relationship like maybe a marriage or a relationship daughter and son, God forbid that is damaged, you cannot pull it apart and then put it together back just to study the parts in isolation. You cannot take your brain out of your body, send it to Memphis at university, and say, study my brain, and when you know something good about it, send it back and put it in my head. You cannot do that. Yeah? Because they are wholes. They are living systems, organisms. You cannot study consciousness, peaceful relationships without systems theory. And that's a very sort of it's an old wisdom made science brand new by Ludwig von Bertalanffy in his general theory of systems. Okay? So when we invoke systems theory, we're talking about biology, neurobiology, quantum physics, the interconnection between all the disciplines, which is sometimes heretic in many universities. In the last 20 years, it's been a big movement towards integration and cross-departmental studies and boundaries. But before that, it was about fragmenting, separating, analyzing. Now it's about synthesis. And actually, it's not about just synthesis. It's about the coordination between the two, the harmonization between those opposites. Sometimes I need to analyze, to resynthesize. Yeah, and once it's synthesized, I let it be, it's good, don't touch it. If it's not bad, don't fix it. Yeah? But when it's starting to become a problem, then you analyze, but if you try to overanalyze, then you kill that system. How do we study consciousness without killing consciousness? How can I set up an experiment where I put somebody to be measured in a laboratory without them feeling, they're supposed to achieve a peaceful state we can measure, let's say, with EEGs, but just to put the EEGs and put them in a laboratory situation, it's stressful to the body. So we're not measuring what we're looking for just by the design of the experiments we're doing. So how do we do that? It's a very challenging situation. Okay? And why should we do that? Well, the why is very simple to my mind, because we're putting people in mental hospitals who are very wise people. And we shouldn't do that, because we are condemning cultures that we don't understand or beliefs in the basis of reductionist scientific belief, which is another form of religion. So I say, well, we cannot prove scientifically the existence of God, but we cannot disprove it neither. If a scientist says to me that he knows that he doesn't believe in God because he's a scientist. I say, that's not science, that's your belief. If you really, really want to apply yourself to the proving that God doesn't exist, you should, well, make your experimental design, lay down your hypothesis, collect your data, present your data, and hopefully you will present your error type 1 or error type 2 hypothesis testing probabilities of having chosen the wrong, accepting the wrong hypothesis when it was false, or true when, or false when it was true, that kind of thing. And then we can say you're doing the science, you're a scientist, which is on the quest of proving that God doesn't exist. Until you do that, you're not talking science. You're talking your own belief. It's another form of religion. It's the religion of no God, if you want to, with its own priests and and that. But when we talk about genuine people be willing to live in peace, we take away all this war between science and religion, which is been bombarding our world since the days of the Roman Church, killing, the people who were understanding the universe in a different way. That was, the pendulum swinging to the side of trying to, push away everything which was to do with God. But we didn't have to push away God. We had to push away wrong beliefs which were destructive. That's all. But okay, we're part of the humanity which has been swinging like this, and we as scientists today, and I would say a big amount of scientists are looking at this very seriously, because we know that we cannot bring peace to the world by producing only weapons. This doesn't make sense. We know that we cannot bring peace to the world if we are segregating families away from families. We know we cannot produce intelligent children. Produce. This is a very, in quotes word. This is the things I hear, not the things I say. But I say it now to compare with the brain of Melchizedek. So we cannot produce children which are intelligent if we inject them with Ritalin every day, because they're going to get a brain damage overdoses and addicted to a substance. And so, you don't have to be a brilliant PhD to know that if you mess up with the brain, you may end up with a bad brain. That's pretty common standard understanding. And the medical maxim says, if you cannot make it better, don't, if you cannot make it a little bit better than it is, don't make it worse. Okay, so stay away. Don't intervene if it's not to make it better.
Do you think you might be able to answer a question or two?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we have a few minutes. Do I have any questions for Joshua about what he's talked about today? Well, I noticed that you were conducting experiments here.
Oh, okay.
Now, are these experiments having to do with what you're talking about there?
Well, the experiments I am part of at the moment is the preparation for experiments. We're not conducting experiments, we're testing equipment, to make sure that EEG-wise, everything is working good, because, you have so much noise on an EEG. The scalp is so far from the cortex that perhaps we don't know if you can get a really good signal to even make a meaningful attempt to explain what's going on in the brain. But through the work of different scientists in the world at the moment, particularly Walter and other scientists, we can see that there is a hope to start to find, through EEGs, spatiotemporal analysis without invading the brain, or inserting electrodes, some kind of meaning and meaningful answers to what we're looking for. And particularly in that side of things, in neuroscience, the creation of knowledge, meaning intentionality and decision making. Okay? Now that's a big subject on its own. And to bring it together with spiritual values, well, that's the idea, that we can do the science of spiritual values. I think we're baby steps in that. This is an area which probably will give a lot of work to many scientists who are willing to apply themselves in young people for the quest of peace, both spiritually and biologically.
All right, is there a question? Anyone? It doesn't matter if you already talk to him, Joshua, all the time. If you've got a question, go ahead and bring it out for him. I have asked Joshua to provide a little music in the closing of the show. I want to remind you that this show is sponsored by the Institute of Applied Metaphysics, the Church of Revelation, and by, at this point, the Grindz Coffee Shop. Joshua will be here for a little while. We will be off camera and you won't get it, but hopefully we'll get him back for more questions and so forth later on. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.